polyvagal theory, safety, somatic therapy, sympathetic response, and attachment. In this video, we're going to be covering a lot of ground about what actually creates safety. Polyvagal theory is a concept that our vagus nerve, which is a giant nerve that runs from our brain all the way down through our body and influences a lot of different things, hence the term poly, that has nerve endings that are in your ears, in your brain, in your eyes, in your facial muscles, and that affects your breathing, your heart rate, your digestion, that all of these things can be influenced by a stress response. And sometimes this stress response can be so embedded into our nervous system, which is what this is, right? It's a nervous system, is that it can cause issues in ways that you are not aware of. So polyvagal theory, which was initially introduced by Stephen Porges and then expanded upon by Deb Dana, says that there's a ladder. And at the top of that ladder is your ventral vagal system. When you think of ventral vagal, the VV, think very vibrant, right? Something that makes you feel alive and good. That's the place that we want to be. That's the place where we feel safety and we want connection with other people. So this ventral vagal, very vibrant place, is what makes us feel good. It makes us want to connect with others. This is when we play with other people. This is when we dance freely. This is when we want to cuddle with people that we care about or go out and play with other people, right? This is our sense of safety and connection with others. This is where you believe that you can have good connections and be authentically yourself. The question is, what happens when you're outside of that ventral vagal system? What happens when something gets activated in you that makes you feel unsafe? In that case, the first place down that you go is called your sympathetic response. And this is what everyone sort of knows, right? The fight or flight response. But really, there's four responses. You have the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. But in this sympathetic response, you have that fight or flight response. And what this response is doing is activating energy, right? It's giving you energy to prepare for what you need to do. So if we have this energy and we mobilize it and we use it, we can feel good, especially if everything else turned out the way that we wanted. This can be like if you were nervous to give a presentation and you give a presentation, but before the presentation, you had all these nerves, you had all this extra energy flowing through your body. But that energy, when you were giving the presentation, actually made you feel good, made you more focused in the moment, and you gave the presentation and you got positive feedback, and you used that energy and you felt good. So using that energy feels good, and when we can get rid of it and use that energy. In that situation, the stress response reacted, we used the energy, we felt good, and everything ends, right? We're back to that ventral vagal state. But what happens when you have that energy and you don't use it, or you can't use it? What happens when a boss or coworker says something that activates that energy in you, but you just have to stay there? There's a part of you that wants to fight or curse them off, or that just wants to get away as quickly as you can, but you can't, right? You're in a meeting, it's a one-on-one meeting, it's your review, and they say something that you don't agree with, and you get this energy and you sit there, and then you go back to your desk and you sit there and you don't get rid of that energy. Question is, what happens to that stored energy, especially if that happens often? Sometimes you're just activated for a while and it's hard for you to focus while you're sitting, right? This is a good situation when it's good to go for a walk, right? Burn off some of that extra energy. On the other hand, if you've gotten so used to bypassing using that energy because you're at work and you get stressed and you sit, what tends to happen is the last part of this, the freeze response. This can sometimes show up in people's bodies, right? This is people with the tight necks or tight backs that are always having these issues because they've gotten used to this freeze response. After that fight or flight response, all that energy, they can't use it, it's capped and it gets stuck in their body. In polyvagal theory, that's called the dorsal vagal activation. So in this case, when you think of dorsal vagal, DV, think of down and depressed vagal activation. This is where you start to freeze. This is when people become depressed. This is when people are always tired. This is when people have issues with any motivation, right? Because they feel down. This dorsal vagal activation becomes something that clamps down your energy. And if you constantly are clamping down that extra energy, then oftentimes that extra energy gets capped so quick you don't even realize that you had that extra energy to begin with. You just feel sad and down and depressed, and you want to take a nap, and you just want to sit on the couch and watch TV and not do anything, and you don't want to interact with friends. And this is that dorsal vagal slow interaction. You tend to just want to freeze. Grief is a good example of dorsal vagal activation, that down, depressed energy, because you don't want to fight or flight per se, but if you lose someone that you care about, you tend to have that down energy, right? Like it's everything feels slow, and you just might want to rest and take a nap and just not deal with things because you feel so sad. And so that's the dorsal vagal activation. So like I said, if you generally have that sympathetic activation, that fight or flight energy, and you constantly tamp it down for whatever reason, then you've taught your body, you've taught your nervous system to clamp down that energy. And what happens when that occurs time and again, especially if it occurred a lot when you were younger, right? If you had a ton of energy when you were younger and you wanted to play and run, but your parents looked down on that and said you had too much energy and they punished you and you had to sit in the corner, and you learned to clamp down all that extra energy, then you learned to have a disconnection between your brain and your body. And so oftentimes people don't even realize that if they are in that dorsal vagal state, that down depressed state, in order to get to that ventral vagal state, that very vibrant state where they feel good, you have to go through that sympathetic activation area, right? You need to learn to use that energy. This is why depressed people generally feel better when they work out, because they are actually burning that energy that they don't even realize that they need to do in order to feel better. This is why people with shame, who are also that dorsal vagal, that down depressed energy, need to get to a place where they can release that frustration. In order to go from that low state of being in that dorsal vagal state, you need to learn to burn that energy, to be able to get out that anxiety, to move your body, to be able to get rid of that energy. And this is why, at least from my point of view, the COVID shutdowns caused the quote-unquote some meatheads to really be bothered by the shutdown of gyms. Because for them, you were taking away their place of refuge, that they know they need to burn energy, and when they didn't have that, they were just angry all the time, because for them, moving their body allowed that activation, that extra energy that they had, that nervous energy, to get out. And when you shut that down, they had nowhere to put it, and so they put it outside towards people that were shutting down the gyms. So in both of these states, right, sometimes the dorsal vagal, the down depressed energy that's been clamping down on that too much energy, you need to sometimes release those muscles. That's why sometimes massages or foam rolling can be really good, because you need to release those muscles and create that balance between your body and brain again. And sometimes you just need to move. You need to burn off that energy. And I think walking is the easiest place to start, but sometimes you might want to hit things or do certain things. And like, as long as it's a safe environment for you to do so, then yeah, burn off that energy in whatever way feels best for you. So again, your body and mind are two interconnected aspects, and by only changing things in your mind, you're not going to change those physiological responses in your body. And if you don't change those, or how you react to those physiological responses, then it becomes hard to do a top-down system when you have so much information going from your body up to your mind. In fact, it's almost 10-to-1 ratio of the amount of information going from your body up to your brain. But being able to give comfort to both your brain, the stories you have, the schemas, and your body, is a way to have and create lasting safety and change. This then goes into somatic experiencing. And somatic experiencing comes from Peter Levine. The basic concept is that in nature, when animals go through these different stages, right, that fight or flight, and then they freeze, where a gazelle is chased by a lion, flees, runs as much as it can, and then is about to be caught, and then freezes and acts dead, and the lion just keeps going after other gazelles. When the gazelle comes up and gets up, they shake it off, right? They move. They have to literally get rid of that nervous energy in their body. Like I said, if you're going from dorsal vagal, the down, depressed area, and you want to get to ventral vagal to feel good, you have to move that energy. And so what Peter Levine's work does is sort of bridges that gap, right? It shows that you do have to move your body in order to feel as well as you can. Too often in humans, though, we don't do that. We have all these stored experiences, these negative experiences that have caused our fight or flight. And if we don't release that energy, it gets stored in our bodies. And those patterns of behavior get stored in our bodies. And the issues that then arise become things like IBS or tight shoulders or low back pain and all these issues in our body that we are like, oh, it's just a physical thing. But really, when you can deal with the physical thing, but they keep coming back, right? You get a massage and the next day you're just as tight. It's not just your body. It's something in your nervous system that's teaching you that you have to be that rigidness. So the key is to be able to release that energy in a safe way at a later time in a safe environment. And if you can do that on a regular basis, you no longer have that stored nervous system dysregulation. Before I go on, I want to say the thing with all models is that they are useful, but they are not the terrain. The end is whether or not this works for you. So I'm giving you a lot of theory right now, and in the upcoming weeks, we're going to go through a lot of the tools and techniques for these things. But I can cite theories until I'm blue in the face. But if it doesn't work for you, then it doesn't work for you. But the goal is to be able to give it an honest shot before you can honestly say that, hey, this doesn't work for you. The key is that these theories are backed up by solid research, but they are not fail-proof. I give you this information because people tend to have an outdated model of what stress is and how to correct it. They think all stress is bad, or they don't see how there's a brain-body connection that needs to be dealt with when you're dealing with stress and safety. The key is that stress and being able to create safety needs to happen both in your mind and your body. This brings me to attachment theory. Attachment theory was first introduced by John Bowlby, where he showed how our caregivers when we were young lead to different attachment styles as we got older. Those attachment theories range from secure, where you feel secure that this person will be there for you, to anxious, where you're not nervous that they'll ever be there, so you're always trying to get their attention, to avoidant, where you no longer even trust that they'll be there for you, so you're like, I have to do this on my own, to disorganized, where you have both that anxiousness, but you also don't want people around, right? You want people, but you don't trust that they're going to be there, so you're disorganized. Nowadays, it's popular for people to take online tests to test what their attachment style is. And then they get something back where it says they're avoidant or they're anxious, as though it's their fate, as though it's their personality. But the bottom line is these things are also learned responses, and any learned response you can change. And with any change, there has to be certain elements, right? You have to feel safe. You have to know what triggers make you feel anxious. And thus far, with the Heart of the Story exercise, you can start to change some of those stories and those interactions and those memories that you've had of feeling anxious. This week, we talk about self-hypnosis and for being able to start to envision how you want to be. And in the upcoming weeks, we're going to talk about some of the physical things that you can do so that you can create that safety in your body, and so that even if you are a quote-unquote anxious attachment now, you can change it so that you are more secure. And finally, all of this comes back to the schemas of this week. And the schemas of this week sort of interact with all these different things of safety, right? Like if you have an overactive amygdala because you weren't given attention or you were taught to fear certain things when you were younger, it could be hard to not see the world through that lens. And in the separate video for this, the psychologist Eckhart Roediger breaks down the 5 basic emotions and shows how a baby, the still face video, can exhibit all those emotions almost instantly. Like 0.2 seconds, those emotions are basic emotions. And those 5 basic emotions are joy, sadness, fear, frustration, and anger. Again, we are trying to constantly balance that joy and connection with ourselves and with other people. So this week is the beginning of understanding the schemas that stand in your way of creating that safety so that you can have that connection with other people. And finding that safety within yourself, within your body, and being able to change those things can have a giant impact on the life that you live and the way you interact with the people in your life. Which brings me to a few things not covered in those theories, but I feel like should be explained. I talked about how there was fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. What fawning is when you or someone agrees with you because they're scared of what would happen if they don't. This is true even if you haven't threatened them, even if you would never threaten them or do anything bad. They have that natural tendency to want to fawn and please other people, and by doing so, they don't even know who they are. They learned that in order to be safe, they have to placate other people. So they simply say yes, not because this is what they actually want to do. They might not even know yes or no what they actually want to do, but they say yes because it's the safest way that they know. So to complete that, it's fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And sometimes fawning can be a little hard to understand. Then there's disconnection, right? There's fight, flight, freeze, and fawn, and then there's disconnection. Here it's like the extreme version of flight or the dorsal vagal depressed down. Here, the people just stay away. They don't want to interact with anyone. This is where disconnection from others feels the safest for them. So this is very different than enjoying some downtime by yourself, but it's the belief that you are safest at all times when you're by yourself, and that any other person that wants to interact with you is a bad thing, and you don't feel safe around anyone ever. And then finally, the last thing that humans do when they are activated is that they turn towards others. We reach out to people we trust in times of stress, right? This is something all humans do. For example, if you have an argument with your partner and you go tell a friend about it, your partner might be upset, but it's a way for you to establish that you can have safety and connection with other people. It's a way for you to feel safe. When tragic events occur, people that might not have ever interacted with one another tend to come together and help each other. So yes, know that there's fight, flight, freeze, fawn, and disconnection, but there's also an innate desire to turn towards other people. And when that innate desire gets shifted or broken or disconnected, then that's the issue, right? Like, we all have that natural response to turn towards other people. And so the most authentic thing that you can do is turn towards other people when you need help. But if you've learned that that is not safe for whatever reason, then we need to allow you to find ways to get back to that. So wrapping up, I just threw an amalgamation of 4 different psychological theories that are relatively new at you in one video. But if safety is what delineates between what you act on or the scope of what you will act on, then knowing this is essential to know all the ways in which you might not feel safe and start to understand ways in which you can feel safe. If you have any questions for me about anything in this video, please feel free to let me know. Cheers.